Hey everyone, hope you're having a great week so far. Thanks for tuning in to an all-new episode of the American Huddle. I'm Hali alongside Andy Gresh. Andy, Week 8 did not disappoint, to say the least. I think at some point in every game, fans were on the edge of their seats. What was your biggest takeaway from this past week of the college football season?
Well, I think we saw some teams kind of gut some things out. We saw close victories. We saw special teams mattered this week, especially in that Memphis game with the big Tony Pollard return. So I think what we're starting to see now, Hali, is October football where you better be sound in all three phases of the game because teams have found their way to round themselves into shape.
Well, let's look back to last week's action starting a week ago on Thursday night, that key West Division matchup. Memphis hits the road to Houston, and the Tigers overcame a 17-point deficit. I mean, they had to bounce back and really fight their way back into this. What does that say about them heading into this last chapter of the season?
It shows they can score, number one, because that's what they had to do in the fourth quarter to be able to win. And number two, again, defensively, the numbers aren't great, but the Memphis defense is doing just enough to be able to win football games. And special teams, look, Tony Pollard, I know I mentioned him out on the outshoot. He's a guy who is a difference maker in the kick return game, and you can argue that, yes, there were turnovers from Houston that were a big part of that game, but his massive kick return kind of flipped the momentum. He was able to jumpstart Memphis and really get them going.
Well, each week we talk about key names for Memphis: Riley Ferguson, Anthony Miller. You mentioned him, Tony Pollard. But this week, if you hadn't heard his name before, you've heard it now. Patrick Taylor, 14 carries, 39 yards, 4 touchdowns. Andy, only 3 touchdowns this whole season leading up to this game. So he was able to step in and make a pretty big difference.
Yeah, and when you can get those kinds of runs, especially in short yardage situations, and get it into the end zone, it takes pressure off of Riley Ferguson, who I thought did yeoman's work, especially in that fourth quarter, to help bring Memphis back for the victory. And on the other side, you look at Houston, turnovers again, a big part of it. I know I talked about it here on the American Huddle a couple of weeks ago, that Kyle Postma's got to clean up the turnovers. The strip sack was big, interception late. Those are killers, but you got to give Memphis a ton of credit, Hali. I thought that I didn't know if defensively they were going to be able to hold up. And, yep, they're winning games 42-38, but they're finding a way to win the games. And at the end of the day, that's all that matters.
Well, the Tigers officially control their own destiny in the West Division as they approach the end of the season. But moving on, UConn hangs on to beat Tulsa 20-14. Wild finish. The Huskies put up the first 20 points in that game, but the Golden Hurricane able to put up 14 points in the fourth quarter and kind of had Husky fans there at the end getting a little bit nervous.
Well, and if you go back, there's a little bit of that shell shock of what's gone on the last 2 years with Bob Diaco there, where there was a lot of close shaves, and you get up 20-0, especially at home, you think you're going to be okay, and then here comes the charge back, and UConn barely able to hold on to get a win. But the Huskies really needed that one, Hali. Look, it's improbable given their schedule that they're going to make it to a bowl, at least the way it's set up right now. But that victory, especially at home, the home fans really needed to see the growth in this football team. And I think the way Randy Edsall and the structure that he put in place, it's starting to pay dividends on the field. There are less penalties. There's more structure. Brian Sheriffs is playing his tail off, and color me shocked. I didn't think he would have been the guy to grab that job in the Rhett Lashlee offense, but he's been fantastic this year.
Well, for the first time in almost 2 years, the Huskies record back-to-back victories, and they'll look for number 3 this weekend. But a team coming off of a disappointing loss is Temple. They played Army on the road. That game went into overtime. But, Andy, the Owls have lost 4 of the last 5 games.
Yeah, and the kicking game kind of, bit them in the rear end a couple of times, and it did against Chef Monken's crew at Army. You got to be able to convert in special teams. That's why I mentioned that, the teams that are playing with all 3 phases and that are blending together and playing complementary football, those are the teams that we're seeing win these close games. And, that Temple Army game is 14-14 early fourth quarter, and then it starts to go back and forth. People look at that Army and Navy offense and think, can they score points when they need to? They can. Temple had it, but they just didn't convert in the kicking game, and that's a devastating loss for Temple, quite honestly.
Well, a team that's having no trouble picking up those wins is UCF. They moved to 6-0 for the first time in program history, a game that we had marked on our calendars for last week against Navy on the road. The Knights pick up this win 31-21. back and forth game. The Mids were in it. They lost Zach Abey in the third quarter with a head injury. He is expected to be back, though, against Temple after their bye week. But what do you think was ultimately the difference in this cross-divisional matchup?
I thought it was getting key stops and key situations for UCF. And the fact that, look, they were able to punch the ball in the end zone whenever they had their opportunities. And, look, I know I harp on this every week here on the American Huddle, and people who watch are going to get tired of it. UCF is mentally tough, and that doesn't mean that Navy isn't, but their mental toughness on the road in front of a record crowd at Navy was able to carry them to victory. And I know I sound like a broken record, but you look at Scott Frost and his mentality, you look at the mentality of his football team, they are simpatico. I thought Navy played a whale of a game. They had to go to the backup quarterback, and it's amazing to me how when Navy's got to go to the number 2 guy on the depth chart, it's like they pick up right where they left off, and they're still competitive. There really isn't a drop-off in that offense. I thought that was a whale of a game and another notch on the belt victory for UCF this year.
Well, another team that picked up a very important win on the road this past week was SMU. They faced Cincinnati, another game that went to overtime. The Mustangs able to pick up that win 31-28. But we've talked about it the past few weeks. Cortland Sutton not finding the ball as much as we anticipated heading into this year, but it's opening up another player on their team, and that is the reigning American Offensive Player of the Week, Trey Quinn.
Yeah, and Quinn has been able to eat because of the presence of Sutton, and Sutton was able to eat a little bit against Cincinnati finally, where they get him much more involved in the passing game. And SMU very quietly now, and you and I kind of talked about SMU at the beginning of the year and saying, okay, maybe they got a little something. Well, here they are. If they can win out the rest of the way, they're another team that has the ability to control where they end up at the end of the year, given who's left on the schedule. And I thought that was a good win for SMU. The more Sutton you get involved in the offense, the more everyone else is going to be able to get involved. And Chad Morris done a really nice job down there with the Mustangs.
Well, 5th win of the season for the SMU Mustangs, one more, and they will clinch bowl eligibility for the first time under Chad Morris at the helm at SMU. So we will definitely be following them this upcoming weekend. We'll get to that a little bit later in the show. But moving on, USF keeps the win streak alive, 12 consecutive victories for the Bulls. 34-28 win at Tulane. The Bulls appeared to be rolling, but then the Green Wave never count them out because they found a way to get back in this one.
No, and it's amazing how Tulane finds a way to make it close in the end, and they put some real strain on that USF defense. I did think USF kind of backed off the accelerator a little bit. The kids are thinking, okay, we're up here in the fourth quarter. And you can't do that against an offense in Tulane that can score quick like Willie Fritz's crew. Yet Darius Tyson ran for 141 yards. That, to me, kind of came out of nowhere. He made some big running plays, but Quentin Flowers, once again, I thought he played really well. He was able to be a factor more in the running game than in the passing game, or it was pretty equal this week in terms of his performance. But USF, another one of those teams that's continuing to roll. What I would like to see, though, and this is where maybe the difference between UCF and USF, UCF will close, USF will maybe let you in the back door like they did this past week. So still some work to do for Charlie Strong, but he's done a good job of walking in, putting his stamp on the program, and they're still undefeated right now. You can't ask for anything more.
Well, Charlie Strong has been very complimentary this week of his quarterback, Quentin Flowers, just basically talking about how he is just the glue guy on this team, very consistent, very humble this season. But how important is it going to be for USF to play all 4 quarters, put them all together, and really finish out strong? Because this could, I mean, they're going to face some pretty good teams here down the stretch.
Yeah, I think you, as a football team every year, regardless of how much success you have, even the Alabamas of the world, each year, each team has to learn to close and play 4 quarters. And, you know, let's go back to UConn for a second. We'd see UConn play 2 good quarters. Maybe it's in the second half. Maybe it's in the first. We talk about them finally pulling it together. The truly good teams are able to deal with the strain. They deal with the adversity. And whenever they have a chance to deliver the knockout punch, they do it and they close the door. And I think USF is still kind of learning that this year. But when you have a quarterback as dominant as Quentin Flowers can be and as good a leader as he is, that's going to make it a lot easier to figure that part of it out.
Well, moving on to the last game of the day from this past week. Andy, you called it. ECU picks up the win over BYU, the second win of the season for the Pirates, and they had to face a little bit of adversity in the process. Their starting quarterback, Thomas Sirk, left the game with an injury. Garner Minshew comes in and is able to close it out. Why were the Pirates able to be victorious this past week?
They made plays in the passing game, and I think that is becoming sort of, okay, ECU football, what do they got? They got wide receivers on the outside that can run. They got guys who can go pick it in the end zone. They're wide receivers and they're athletes. You can see the athleticism and the speed developing in that program. ECU is a team on the rise. It's going to take a while because the American Athletic Conference this year is as tough as any year it has been in existence. But ECU, man, those athletes are jumping out. There's speed all over the field. And I know as an alum, you must be pretty excited that the Pirates, it looks like they're finally starting to turn the corner. Even though it may only say there's 2 wins on the resume, they're playing everybody tough and they're making big plays and the athletes are there. It's just a matter of time.
Well, Coach Montgomery was certainly pleased with this victory. He said it was the first real team win he saw this season, really executed in all 3 phases of the game, so trending in the right direction for ECU.
And quickly, I think when you get the win at home, you know, it keeps those home fans coming back. It's a little bit like UConn this week, where they do a good job of filling the building at ECU for the most part, and those people get rewarded for their loyalty. Again, you can see it coming with ECU. It might not be this year, but next year they're going to be a tough out.
All right, well, the Pirates have the week off, but let's take a look at some games that we do have to look forward to this upcoming weekend. Kind of a different schedule. We'll have 2 games Friday night, 3 on Saturday, and some non-conference play in the mix. So taking a look at Friday, Tulane at Memphis. The Green Wave have already met their win total from last season. This could be a pretty good game.
Yeah, I think it will be. And for Memphis, it's how do you deal with success? They've gotten 2 big ones in a row. Can they tighten it up defensively? But as we noted, Tulane has the ability to score. And again, that running game has got to keep coming along for Memphis to take some of the pressure off Riley Ferguson. But Hali, I think they know that if they need to have Riley Ferguson throw the ball 50 times, he's got the ability to put 300-400 yards up on the board and be able to carry you. So for Memphis, it's, hey, let's put the flag in the ground. Let's tell everyone that we really are here to stay. And they would do that with a nice follow-up win against the Tulane bunch that ain't going to come in and roll over.
All right, well, that one kicks at 8 p.m. Eastern, 7 Central on CBS Sports Network. Also on Friday night, Tulsa at SMU. The Mustangs are looking to clinch bowl eligibility, as we mentioned, under head coach Chad Morris. Tulsa struggling this season, coming off a heartbreaking loss on the road last week at UConn. What does SMU need to do to win this game?
Well, it's continue what they started last week, which is, and look, any great player that you have, establish Sutton early, work off of that. Use Cortland Sutton as the chess piece. To me, that's what they got to do. And here's the thing about Tulsa. When you're up on them, don't take your foot off the accelerator. And I know some people are going to say, well, it sounds like you're encouraging running up the score. No, it's encouraging victory is really what it is, because you can be up 48-14, and you know that Tulsa's got the ability. You make a mistake, they can put 3 on the board pretty quick, and the next thing you know, you're in a battle. So keep playing all 4 quarters if you're SMU. And, you know, you kind of said something there, Hali, that every athlete and player is going to get excited about the bowl eligibility. You know, if I'm a coach, maybe I address it one time with the guys, but I might tell my assistants, hey, listen, dangle that in front of them like the old carrot in front of the donkey, and let those guys start to dream and think about being bowl eligible, and let's make sure we get there and then go out and play a great football game.
Well, that would certainly be a great accomplishment for SMU, but they may have bigger goals on their minds this season as they still control their own destiny to play in this conference championship. So no question, a big game in the West Division for the Mustangs on Friday night. That one kicks at 9 p.m. Eastern, 8 Central on ESPN2. Moving on to Saturday, the lone conference game of the day. It's Houston at USF. Could be in store for another great game there, a 3:45 p.m. kick. The Cougs are coming off back-to-back losses, Tulsa and Memphis. How does Houston get back into this one?
Again, I know I'm harping on it. Clean up the turnovers. There's that. And then there's make sure that USF, you don't allow Quentin Flowers to dominate, as we've kind of talked about. Now, that's where Ed Oliver's got to be a big part of the game plan, to control the middle so the USF can't bust them up with guys like Darius Rice and others. But at the end of the day, it's about defense. And I think USF's defense is better than Houston's. And if they can get the big turnover, as we've seen, that's going to go a long way to USF getting a win. However, I'm going to put USF on a little bit of danger alert here because we know Houston can score. They got to be in their bonnet, and they got something to play for now. They've lost 2 tough games. They got to find a way to get one, so USF better be on alert.
Yeah, that Houston group, no doubt, has to be hungry under head coach Major Applewhite.
And they're not playing that bad, Haley. They really aren't.
So, ultimately, though, do you think USF wins this
I
one?
do. I think USF ends up getting the victory. But this game, this is going to be one of those where the score, in my opinion, is not going to be indicative of the way the game is played.
All right, well, that is the lone conference game of the day on Saturday. Should definitely be entertaining. But moving on, Austin Peay at UCF. The Knights coming off of that big win. They're 6-0 for the first time in program history. This game could be a little bit tricky. The Knights have been rolling all season, but do you think the Knights sleep on Austin Peay this weekend?
No. Gosh, no. We've known, I think, from Scott Frost, he's not going to let his crew sleep. In fact, what I'd like to see from UCF is get up 50-0 in the first half and then sit everybody down in the second half and try to get some people some rest. You know, and that's with all due respect to the opponent, but let's face it, UCF is legitimately a top 15 football team in the country right now, and if I can find a way to get my guys a little bit of rest at this point in the year because we jump up and get a big lead, if I'm the head coach, I'm going to do that, and that's what I expect from UCF. I mean, that to me, it's going to be 48-0 first half.
All right, so you think the mental toughness prevails and UCF keeps rolling strong.
Yeah, they're gonna eat them for lunch.
All right. And the last game of the day, also out of conference, Mizzou heads to UConn. Kind of an interesting opportunity for the Huskies to pick up their 3rd straight win under head coach Randy Edsall. Mizzou having a tough season as well. So what do you anticipate to see here?
Look, I think this is a pick-em game, quite honestly. UConn's very much got a live chance to win this thing. Brian Sheriffs is playing a good brand of football right now. He said Missouri is down. They're trying to figure out sort of who they're becoming after the coaching change. But Randy Edsall's got his group believing and playing some pretty good defense. And, you know, these two have battled before, and the games have been close. The one last year at Missouri came down to really a field goal at the end of the game. I think UConn's going to pull the upset here. They got a little mojo working right now. They've got a lot of things going their way. It really comes down to, can Brian Sheriffs take care of the football? If he does, and UConn can get a turnover or two, they might win a rock fight like, 1917 or something crazy like that. But I could see UConn getting the win here. They're starting to put it together a little bit, and their schedule gets much more difficult the rest of the way. But they're going to get this one. I just have a feeling that Missouri is down this year, and it'd be a good P6 win for the Huskies.
All right. Well, UConn trending up. Certainly been exciting to see the offense improve this year. I think we've definitely seen that.
Yeah, no question. Arkell Newsome in space is a really good back. A lot of people sleep on him.
All right. Well, tune into that one at 6:30 p.m. Eastern on CBS Sports Network. Now, Andy, let's talk conference championship scenarios, because I think the past couple of weeks,
I like this.
There's been a lot of things that have happened, especially in that West Division, that have started to kind of maybe draw this path to the championship game. USF and UCF in the East Division, both of these teams are rolling, and Cincinnati is actually the only team mathematically eliminated from championship contention, but it's going to be pretty tough to stop the Knights or the Bulls heading into December, and they'll meet the last week of the season, Thanksgiving week that is, to probably play to represent the East Division in the championship. It's sort of looking that way.
Can we do a live American Huddle from there, like Florida for Thanksgiving? That's not a bad way to go.
The war on I-4. People are already talking about it, but there's a few games to go before then. But looking in the West, a little bit different. So SMU is this team that in the preseason, we thought they could be in the mix, but they are definitely in the mix right now. They're sitting at 2-1 in conference play. Memphis just ahead of them at 3-1. But both of these teams control their own destiny. SMU, though, the end of the season here, the last 4 games after Tulsa, pretty difficult. UCF, Navy, Memphis,
Gauntlet.
Tulane.
Gauntlet.
How do you see this kind of shaping up?
Boy, that's a tough one. I think UCF is the best team in the league right now. So I think there's a loss there. Otherwise, SMU, I think, is going to be pretty competitive. And again, I know that I've got this unabashed love for UCF, but it jumps off the screen whenever you watch them. So I think the West battle, I'm expecting there's going to be some roadblocks on the way. Like when we're here talking about the final weekend of the regular season, we're going to be going through countless tiebreaker scenarios, I think, for the West. quite honestly, because I just see it getting muddy over the next couple of weeks. And then in terms of the East, you nailed it. It's UCF, it's USF. Those two teams are on a collision course. So from points allowed, I was just kind of peeking at this. UCF, 105 points allowed. USF, 131. Far and away better than anybody in the conference. And among, say, the top 30 in all of college football, those two teams defensively are elite. I think the defenses in the West, they're going to have some breakdowns. There's going to be some scoring. And that's why I think it's going to be much more about a tiebreaker scenario in the West. Whereas in the East, it's going to be a head-to-head rock fight, the war on I-4. That'll tell us everything we need to know on that part of the league.
All right, well, for Memphis, their wins over Houston and Navy proving to be pretty important at this point because they're not only sitting at the top, a game ahead, but it actually puts them an extra game ahead in theory because of that head-to-head tiebreaker.
Sure.
So winning those key games are extremely important when you talk about tiebreakers come the end of the season.
Yeah, no question. And for me, for Memphis, it's, again, will the defense hold up? Will the kicking game hold up? As good as they are in their return game, that's a big difference maker. And I admit I kind of sleep on Memphis a little bit. To me, it's because their defense doesn't lock anybody down. And that's why I'm so bullish on those Florida teams, because those two have the ability to lock people up defensively and make it difficult on you. Whereas if Riley Ferguson, I mean, look, we saw him at UConn, and they ended up blowing UConn out, but he had to throw 7 touchdown passes to get them rolling. You're not going to get that every week. So the pressure that Memphis puts on their quarterback, because their defense doesn't hold that point total down, it could end up swallowing a guy up. But if he rises through it, we're talking about Conference Player of the Year type stuff from Riley Ferguson.
All right, well, we're about 5 weeks out or so from the conference championship game in that first weekend in December. As mentioned, Cincinnati, the only team mathematically eliminated from championship contention, but it's always fun to predict what is to come, Andy. And I think, looking at the East, it kind of, right, if it were to end today, right, USF, UCF,
right.
SMU, Memphis on the other side. Who is your pick to meet from each division in the championship game as of right now in October?
Wow, this is a tough one. I'm going to roll with UCF because, I dig them. Oh, my goodness, out west. Oh, boy. I guess I'm going to go with Memphis because of the head-to-head tiebreakers, but you can tell I don't feel great about it. Because I think SMU has the ability to play up and beat anybody. And I just look at Navy. I know they've got 2 losses already in the league, but Navy always finds a way to be a factor in the final weekend, and I can't rule them out. So I guess right now I'll go Memphis, but I don't feel great about that pick in the West because I see the looming specter of Coach Ken's crew, and they're always there in the end some way, somehow.
All right, well, in order to fill Andy's prediction here, Navy is going to need a little bit of help, and that will require some losses from Memphis and SMU both.
Right, which are eminently doable. And again, SMU's schedule is tough. That's where playing the other part of the league ends up maybe kind of biting you in the rear end. Here's what we've chronicled, okay? Number one, nothing is for sure. We feel good about the East, and the 2 Florida teams are going to be there. In terms of the West, we really don't know. What it means is we're setting up for maybe the best month of November the American Athletic Conference has ever had on the football end. We're a weekend away from heading into what really is money time in college football, which is the month of November. And this league is poised to have a couple of teams not only in the national conversation, but in terms of some of the bowl slots, they're going to be really good teams representing the American Athletic Conference this year when we get into the month of December. November is going to be a ton of fun, and I expect we're going to be doing the whole, okay, this tiebreaker, that tiebreaker on that west side, because those teams, there isn't a big separation between everybody else and the top teams in the West the way there is in the East.
Well, I think one of the reasons, why we all love college football, and we're very fortunate, is that some of these bigger games happen to be coming towards the end of the season. So my favorite part about, people battling it out on both the west side and the east side is that they get to settle this thing on the field.
Yeah.
So the best team ultimately should end up playing in that championship game.
And I'll tell you the other thing that Commissioner Mike Oresco has done that is really smart and that makes the regular season matter is that, you're fighting to have the conference championship game in your backyard. You actually get rewarded for being the best team in the American Athletic Conference. It's not we're going to take it to some neutral site. You get the home gate. You get your home fans. So if you earn it during the regular season, you get that extra bump come championship weekend. And I think that's a big, big deal, especially if UCF ends up winning out and they're getting everybody coming down there in Orlando. Weather's going to be pretty nice. There shouldn't be anything in theory that would stop UCF from that train rolling. Whereas, let's say somebody else ends up winning it where you can get some bad weather, then all bets are off, and there's Mother Nature that could screw things up. But I love the fact that in the American, if you win the league, you get that conference championship game at home. That's a great reward.
You got me so excited for the month of November.
I know, right?
I know.
Can we just hit the button and fast forward?
I don't want it to end though at the same time. I love this time of year. It's fantastic.
All right, so folks, here's what you need to know. So Hali is a world traveler, and there are things that she has to do for the American Athletic Conference. So we're going to be giving you the American Huddle a day earlier, but here's what we need from you.
Questions.
We need you to send us your questions over the weekend. So when those games end on Saturday, make sure you send them to us at Hali Houghton, at The Real Gresh on Twitter, all the platforms of the American Athletic Conference on Facebook and Twitter as well, because I think people kind of know that, we come together, we do this, we put it out on the web and everything, but we're going to be moving it up a day whenever we do it, so we need your questions early. So as soon as the weekend games are over, make sure you send us questions, even if it's, hey, will that fat dope ever believe in the Memphis defense? That's fine. I'll take that. I'm willing to talk about it, but make sure you get your questions in.
If I had a nickel for every time you called yourself a fat dope on this show, I'd be a rich woman.
You know what? Then we're gonna have to figure that out.
I might start writing you some questions. I have questions because these are turning out to be a really, really exciting end of the season.
Yeah,
so I might start sending you my questions.
You definitely should write them down.
I will. I'll write them down. I'll bring them in.
We'll give you like a little desk. You can be the teacher. I'll sit down like the student, and you can ask me questions. Give me a little test.
Well, that sounds like a very fun time. But seriously, send us your questions. We're here to answer them all for you, and we promise you that we will. Looking forward to the last 4 or 5 weeks of coming together and bringing you the American Huddle as the American season winds down, and it's going to end in exciting fashion.
There's no question. This league always delivers great conference championship games, and this year's going to be no different.
All right. Well, thanks so much for tuning in to another episode of the American Huddle. We'll look forward to seeing you back here next week. On behalf of Andy Gresh, I'm Hali Houghton. Have a great weekend, everybody.